My name is Landon. I'm 28, the youngest in a middle-class family living out in the Chicago suburbs. My older brother, Brian, he's 35, a hotshot lawyer with his own firm downtown. He drives a Tesla Model S, always dressed in custom suits, dripping in that heavy, commanding cologne that screams power. And me? I spend my days digging up dirt, trimming trees, covered in mud and sweat on the rundown farm my grandpa left behind. Tonight, at my dad's 65th birthday party, the whole extended family was packed into our big house. Jazz music floated in the air, wine glasses clinked, and the smell of grilled steak filled the room. As always, Brian was the center of attention. He stood at the top of the staircase, raising his glass of red wine, that smug voice echoing through the room. To Dad, the best father we could ever ask for. And to Landon, he sneered, tilting his chin at me, our proud dirt farmer. Can't wait to taste those fancy weeds you've been growing. There was a beat of silence, then laughter exploded, echoing off the walls. I felt every spotlight burn into my skin, exposing every dried mud streak, every sweat stain from racing home earlier. Mom glanced at me with that tired, disappointed look, then turned to Brian, beaming with pride. Dad roared with laughter, slapping Brian's shoulder like I didn't even exist. I swallowed hard, my face on fire. A few cousins giggled, one pointed, "Careful, don't get dirt on your dress." Another cousin sighed, shaking her head, whispering, "I told him to get a job at Brian's firm ages ago." I clenched my beer glass so tight my hand cramped. I had tried to be like Brian once, went to college, interned at a law office, but I hated the stale AC, the fake handshakes, those suffocating suits. I quit. I came back to the dirt, the only place that felt real. Brian stepped down, threw an arm over my shoulder, that expensive cologne smacking me in the face. He leaned in, whispering just for me, "When you're done playing farmer, I might have a janitor opening at my office." I shoved his arm off me so hard my beer crashed to the floor, shattering. The room went dead silent. A single drop splashed onto Brian's leg, and he jerked back like it was acid. My heart pounded so loud it hurt. I looked at him, then at every frozen face in that room. I took a breath so deep it burned my throat. "Laugh all you want," I rasped. "One day, you'll remember tonight, and you'll eat every damn word you just said." Mom shut up, snapping, "Landon, don't embarrass me in front of everyone." Dad stood behind her, cold eyes, just shaking his head. I looked at her, searching for a trace of warmth, anything. There was nothing. And right then, something sharp and silent flared inside me, like a blade slicing through my chest. No one stopped me as I stormed upstairs. I crammed a few old t-shirts and a pair of worn-out jeans into my bag, grabbed the crumpled cash I'd saved from selling veggies at the farmer's market. Before zipping up, I paused. My eyes landed on that old wooden desk, the scratched photo frame of me and Grandpa laughing in the tomato garden. I whispered, "Grandpa, I'll make them swallow every last word they spat at me." I bolted downstairs, cutting across the stunned crowd. Every pair of eyes clung to me, half shocked, half disgusted. Somewhere, I heard an ant hiss, "He's completely lost it." I swung the door open. The night air slammed into my face, sharp and cold, but it felt clean. I stepped onto the porch, the smell of damp earth after rain filling my lungs. I gripped my backpack tight, feeling, for the first time, something close to lightness. Could I turn this shunned land into something worth pride? Could I ever rise above, make them look up at me? I didn't know, but tonight, for the first time, I chose to believe in myself. I walked down the driveway, hearing the door click shut behind me, like it was sealing off my entire past. I knew I'd fall. I knew I'd fail. but I also knew I'd rise, and someday I'd make every last one of them eat the words they threw at me tonight. I drove an old pickup I borrowed from a friend, tearing through those rain-slick roads in the dead of night. The streetlights blurred like oil streaks on water. In my head, Brian's words kept echoing. Dirt farmer, janitor, cleaning my office. I pulled up in front of Grandpa's abandoned land, almost 2 hours away from the family house. A rotten wooden sign dangled loosely. Haven Hollow Farm, an old name soaked in memories. I clicked on my flashlight and scanned the nearly 12 acres. Weeds waist high. The wooden fence was about to collapse. The tool shed leaned dangerously, ready to fall. The night was dead silent except for crickets and that heavy smell of wet soil mixed with rotting wood. I zipped my jacket up to my neck, my mind whispering, "Am I actually losing it?" I opened the shed, flashlight beams sweeping across rusty shovels, twisted metal wires, and an old photo of Grandpa pinned to the wall. In it, he stood proudly in the tomato field, holding up a giant ripe one, grinning like a kid. Soil never betrays the honest. That line kept looping in my head like a prayer. I started cleaning out the shed. Every rusty nail I yanked, every rotted plank I tore down, felt like stripping off layers of weight, crushing my chest. By sunrise, I was wiped out, sprawled across the cold ground, the scent of wild grass wrapping around me. As I closed my eyes, I thought I saw Grandpa's face appear, waving, lips moving in some inaudible blessing. A week later, I officially moved into Haven Hollow Farm. Every morning, I'd get up before dawn, boots heavy with dew, and head to the field. I learned to tell each type of soil apart, to use organic compost, to water at just the right time to make the carrots sweet and the kale crisp. The cash I had was dwindling fast. I lived off ramen and sometimes boiled leftover potatoes I dug up. Each night, I'd collapse on the wooden floor, body throbbing, but my mind lit up with new ideas. One afternoon, while I was setting up netting over the strawberry rows, I heard a truck stop at the gate. I looked up and saw an old man with a shock of white hair, leaning on a cane, wearing a faded khaki jacket. He stood by the truck, smirking. "Landon, right? I'm Walter." I recognized him instantly. Walter had been Grandpa's best friend, a legendary chef in Chicago before he retired. When I was a kid, he once taught me how to carve a watermelon into a rose. I dropped everything and ran over to shake his hand. "How did you know I was here?" Walter just nodded, eyes scanning the farm. "This place was your grandpa's pride and joy, but with weeds up to your ribs, you must be struggling, huh?" I gave a sheepish laugh, sweat soaking my back. I'm trying to keep it alive." Walter eyed me head to toe, then suddenly slapped my shoulder so hard I nearly buckled. "This land doesn't need someone to keep it alive. It needs someone real." He let out a raspy laugh and started hobbling along the fence. With each step, he pointed things out. "Those weeds need to come out by the roots. That irrigation pipe is leaking. The carrots are waterlogged. You need to aerate the soil." I scrambled after him, scribbling notes furiously. Walter kept walking and teaching, his eyes burning bright like little embers. That night, Walter stayed. We shared an old beer, the same one Brian had mocked me for, calling it salad juice. Walter talked about his years in New York, those overpriced dishes he used to craft, and Grandpa's dream of building the cleanest farm in the entire Midwest. "Your grandpa always said, someday city folks will line up just to taste these weeds," Walter chuckled, his cloudy eyes flickering with light. Right then, everything clicked. Brian's taunts, my family's pity, Mom's disappointed stares, all of it twisted together, fueling a fire in my gut. I didn't just see a patch of dirt anymore. I saw a stage, a restaurant, a line of people stretching down the road. I saw Brian sitting at a fancy table, head bowed, chewing on those very greens he ridiculed tonight. I let out a shaky breath, telling myself, I can't fail. That night, under the leaky shed roof, I set Grandpa's photo next to my makeshift bed and hugged my empty backpack tight. I looked through the crack in the door, watching moonlight spill across the wild field, listening to crickets and the wind whispering through the tin sheets. For the first time in years, I actually smiled thinking about the future. Not the future of a dirt farmer to be laughed at, but the future of someone about to flip every single expectation on its head. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. This morning, the fog was so thick, I had to swipe it away with my hands just to see the path out to the fields. Walter had been up even earlier. He was out there inspecting the homemade irrigation system we'd spent almost 2 weeks putting together. "Don't shock the plants with cold water, Landon," he rasped, but his voice was firm as stone. "Only water when the soil's warm enough. Don't rush it, no matter how tempting it gets. You hear me?" I nodded, bent over checking each row of carrots and the spinach plants. Sweat beaded on my forehead even though it was barely 7. My hands were rough and cracked, my nails forever packed with dirt. But every time I looked at those thriving rows, my heart sparked like a live wire. At night, Walter taught me how to make organic compost, how to rotate crops through the seasons. He'd talk about those high-end salads he once made in Manhattan, then snort, "Nothing tastes as good as a leaf you pick with your own hands that morning." One day, while I was herding the chickens back into the coop, a shiny Range Rover pulled up to the gate. A blonde woman stepped out, her long hair almost glowing, dark blue eyes sharp, a tight white dress hugging every curve. She leaned against her car, lips painted a fierce red, smirking as she watched me awkwardly wipe my hands on my jeans. "I'm guessing you're Landon?" I nodded, still too stunned to speak. She stretched out a manicured hand, her nails shimmering like pearls. "I'm Emily. I run Willow Grove Farm across the road. My family supplies organic produce to big supermarket chains." Her gaze slid slowly over me, stopping at my chest, her eyes narrowing slightly like she was savoring some forbidden dessert. "I hear you're trying to revive Haven Hollow Farm. That's brave," Emily said, letting out a soft laugh that revealed a mischievous little fang. I tried to stay composed, but my breath came heavier than usual. "I'm just doing what I believe in." Emily stepped closer, her jasmine perfume curling around me. Her hand landed gently on my arm. Belief or just stubbornness? In that instant, my heart hammered like it was trying to break out of my ribs. Her blue eyes pierced through the dirt on my skin, straight into every hidden, fragile place inside me. Emily smiled, then turned, walking away. "Don't worry," she said as she opened her car door. "I'll be back. I'm curious to see what a dirt farmer like you plans to turn this place into." She sped off, leaving a mix of exhaust and jasmine hanging in the air. I stood frozen, my chest churning with a restless electric unease. In the days that followed, Emily kept coming by. Sometimes she brought fresh peach tarts, other times local wine. Each visit she wore a new dress, always tight, always revealing her smooth shoulders, her endlessly long legs. We started having dinner together under the porch lights. Emily would talk about the massive deals her family was closing, about upscale restaurants about to launch in Chicago. One night, as I was washing my hands after dinner, Emily slipped up behind me, pressing her body into my back. Her breath scorched the back of my neck, her delicate fingers sliding down my stomach. "What if I told you I could get your produce into every top restaurant in Chicago?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I only felt the tremor ripple down my spine. Emily turned me around, her red lips brushing against my neck, gliding up my chin, then teasing across my mouth. I sank into her scent, her heat, the thunder in my veins. That night, we crashed onto the old wooden floor, tangled in each other, breathless, drowning in sweat and moans and ragged gasps. In that moment, I forgot Brian, forgot every insult, every sneer. But the next morning, Emily was gone. All that remained was a small note on the table. "Think bigger. I can help if you trust me." Walter found out. He just looked at me, a mix of pity and anger clouding his eyes. "Don't let your feelings turn you into someone's puppet," he said, before heading out to the fields without another word. I tried to focus on work, but Emily's touch, those wild nights, her sweet promises, they haunted me. Slowly, Emily started suggesting more partnerships, finding investors, connecting me with celebrity chefs, planning exclusive tasting events. I got swept up in that intoxicating dream, that hunger to step into the world Brian once lorded over me. Yet every night, Walter's words echoed in my head. "Don't turn yourself into a puppet." I kept asking myself, did Emily really want to help, or was she after something else? Was I repeating old mistakes, trusting the wrong person again? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I was walking deeper into something both alluring and dangerous, and it was already too late to turn back. In the weeks that followed, Emily showed up more and more, each time with sweeter promises and secret meetings. She took me to exclusive wine parties, introduced me to big-name chefs. Every time I stood next to her, I didn't feel like the mud-caked farmer Brian used to sneer at. I felt almost unstoppable. One night at a rooftop party overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline, Emily wrapped her arm around mine and whispered, "See this? This is the world where your produce deserves to shine." I looked around, expensive gowns, perfectly tailored suits, the delicate chime of wine glasses, seductive smiles. In that fleeting moment, I wondered, was I getting closer to my dream or drifting too far from it? When I got back to the farm, Walter was waiting under the porch light, a cigarette unlit in his hand. The yellow glow from the shed carved deep lines into his face. "You're gone more and more," Walter muttered. "This land doesn't need someone who just flashes business cards and then disappears." I snapped. "What do you think I'm doing? I want to elevate these vegetables. I don't want to stay stuck at some cheap farmer's market forever." Walter just gave a raspy laugh. "Elevate them or sell them out." Those words hit me like a slap. I stormed into my room and slammed the door, but I didn't sleep at all. Walter's words echoed all night. The next morning, Emily brought a thick stack of paperwork. She said, "If you really want a restaurant, I can help you secure funding. I have investors ready to pour in cash, but they'll need to control the marketing, the menu, even pick the head chef." I flipped through it, my heart pounding. In my head, I saw a bright, bustling restaurant, rough wooden tables, lines of people waiting, fresh garden salads being served, cameras flashing non-stop. Then I saw the fine print: brand ownership rights, control over produce supply, investor profit percentages. I looked at Emily, trying to read her eyes, full of promise, but as cold as a frozen lake. "I don't want to turn this farm into some industrial chain," I croaked. Emily stepped closer, her hands sliding down my back, her voice a soft blade. "You'll never grow if you cling to these naive ideals. This is a once-in-a-lifetime shot, Landon. Do you want to sell at the farmer's market your whole life?" I trembled. In that moment, Brian's voice thundered in my head. Dirt farmer. My relative's sneers. Mom's cold stares. I pulled Emily into me, my mouth searching for hers, desperate for comfort in the storm. But behind it all, Walter's voice roared, "Don't turn yourself into a puppet." That night, I walked into the garden, the contract in hand. The moonlight spilled across the fields that had come back to life through my sweat, my blood, my sleepless nights. I closed my eyes and imagined each spinach leaf, each carrot, stamped and soulless, stripped of story, reduced to mere product. I tore the contract page by page, throwing them into an old barrel and setting them on fire. The flames shot up, lighting my face, part fury, part sorrow. The next morning, Emily arrived and saw the black ashes. She screamed, "Are you insane? You just burned the only chance you had to become a multi-million-dollar restaurant owner." I looked her straight in the eyes, for the first time truly seeing what was inside: ambition, calculation, and not a hint of tenderness. "You don't get it," I said. "I don't want to be a fake king. I want my food to tell a true story about this land, about this sweat, not about greedy investors." Emily slapped me, the crack slicing through the silent morning air. She turned, voice hissing, "You'll regret this. I swear you'll never rise above dirt." She sped off, her tires ripping into the dirt road, leaving a cloud of dust hanging behind. I stood there, watching until all that was left was a faint haze. Walter stepped out and laid a hand on my shoulder. "Good," he murmured. "Now we really begin." I turned to him, tears spilling out, but a smile broke across my face. That night, I pulled out my notebook and started sketching the first design for my dream restaurant. Raw wooden space, open kitchen, diners watching the chefs prepare every dish, vegetables going straight from the field to the plate. For the first time, this dream felt fully mine, not twisted by anyone else's hands. I swore to myself, no one would ever destroy this. Not Brian, not Emily, no one. I closed my notebook and looked out at the garden through the window. The sky sparkled with stars, the dark soil shimmering like it was whispering back to me, "Yes, let the story start with you." When Emily vanished, I thought I'd collapse. But instead of breaking, it felt like someone had shot pure adrenaline straight into my veins. I started waking up at 4 a.m., checking every row, every plant, every drop of dew resting on the leaves. Walter stood by, those old eyes of his sharp as a scalpel. "Now you get it, Landon," he said as I hauled fertilizer bags twice my weight. "If you want people to taste something real, you gotta sweat for it first." I laughed, sweat pouring down and mixing with the mud on my forehead. Every day, we started transforming the old shed into a rough, makeshift kitchen. I rebuilt every rotten plank with my own hands. Walter taught me how to break down meat properly, carve vegetables into flowers, whip up herb sauces from the plants growing right outside the door. We started hosting secret tasting dinners for a few neighbors, the same people who once looked at me like I was a mud-soaked joke. Each time they chewed, eyes wide, heads nodding, I felt every cell in my body catch fire. Word spread faster than I expected. A local food blogger, a friend of one of the neighbors, wrote a review. "The most honest meal I've ever had. Every ingredient tasted like it still carried the morning dew. The word fresh doesn't even come close." I got an email from a famous Chicago chef wanting to visit. Walter read it and just nodded slightly. "Don't let your mind drift off with their praises. Keep your feet in the dirt." But for the first time, I truly believed this path could work. I redrew the restaurant blueprint in more detail: reception area, open kitchen, vegetable gardens wrapping around it, each table serving only a few guests at a time, every dish coming straight from the earth to the plate. One night, while I was checking the greenhouse, I heard a strange noise at the far end of the field. I grabbed my flashlight and ran. What I saw made my blood boil. The fence had been cut, tomato rows trampled, spinach beds ripped out. I screamed, sprinted to the shed to grab tools, but it was too late. A small truck tore off down the back path, its tires crushing the blossoming strawberry beds on its way out. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, throat burning dry. In the moonlight, I caught a glimpse of a logo on the truck, a big produce distribution company. Emily's former partner. I ran back and saw Walter trembling on the porch, his face pale. They threatened me," he stammered, "said they'd burn the whole farm if you didn't stop this restaurant nonsense." I grabbed him, my chest heaving. "Don't worry, they haven't won yet." But deep inside, I felt everything crumbling. My money was nearly gone. The crops were mostly destroyed. I stayed up all night, staring at my trembling hands, my nails black with dirt. I thought of Brian, of Emily, of my mother's cold, empty stare. Was I just a fool stuck in a daydream? The next morning, Walter dragged me up, his hand dry and brittle as winter branches. "Go," he ordered. "Go ask for seeds. Ask the neighbors, borrow land. If you just sit here crying, you're already dead." I dragged myself to the market, knocking on every farm door, begging for seed bags, fertilizer sacks. Some laughed, some pitied me, but still they gave. I came back with piles of seeds and rough, second-hand tools stacked in the yard. That night, as I sorted the seeds, Walter set an old notebook on the table. On the first page it read, "Haven Hollow Vegetable Recipes." Walter pointed to the last page, voice low. "This is your grandpa's entire legacy. I kept it all this time, waiting for you to be ready." I flipped through, eyes blurring. Handwritten recipes for fresh salads, herb sauces, summer vegetable soups. Tears dripped onto the ink-smeared pages. I looked up at Walter. He said nothing, just nodded. I clutched the notebook to my chest, feeling a new fire surge inside me. Suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just about revenge or proving someone wrong. This was blood, legacy, a promise to the land and to Grandpa. I wiped my tears and looked at Walter. "Tomorrow, we start again." He smiled, a tired, worn-out smile, but it shone. Yes, and this time, no one can break it. That night, I lay on the cold wooden floor, the notebook pressed to my chest. Through the window, a thin crescent moon rose, casting light over the ruined fields. But in my mind, I saw a garden full of green rose, a kitchen glowing with warmth, diners laughing, plates emptying. I whispered into the night, "Laugh all you want, Brian, just wait and see." And I drifted into sleep, my hands gripping that legacy, my promise to never, ever fall again. After the sabotage, Walter and I practically lived out in the fields. I barely slept, ate just enough to stand upright, my weight dropping fast. But every morning, when I saw the first green shoots break through the soil, my blood felt hotter than any morning coffee. Walter called in a few old friends, retired chefs, neighboring farmers. They came to help clear the garden, rebuild fences, water each row, cover each fragile plant. One old man hobbled on a cane, still insisting on holding up a dew-soaked net. "We've all been pushed around enough in this life," he panted, "but at least now there's a kid willing to fight for something real." I was so overwhelmed I couldn't speak, just bowed my head and worked, my tears mixing into the sweat and mud. 3 months later, the fields turned lush green again. I emptied my last savings to build an open kitchen in the old shed and bought a set of proper chef knives. Walter and I designed the first menu. Crisp garden salad picked minutes before serving, silky spinach soup, and rustic whole-grain bread from wheat we grew ourselves. I sent invites to a few local food bloggers with just one line: "Taste a meal born of soil, sweat, and sincerity." On opening day, only 6 guests showed up. They looked around, surprised by how raw and simple everything was. Handmade wooden tables, warm hanging lights, vegetables picked right in front of them and taken straight into the kitchen. When I served the first salad, I stood still, watching every expression. One guest chewed slowly, eyes closed tight. Another turned to a friend and burst out, "Holy shit, this is unreal." That first review dropped the same night. Food isn't just on the plate, it lives in the story and the trembling hands of the farmer behind it. From 6 guests, we grew to 20 the next week, then 40. Soon, calls flooded in for reservations weeks ahead. I had to hang a sign out front, "Fully booked," something I'd never dared even dream. One afternoon while prepping soup, Walter burst in, clutching his old flip phone. "Michelin just called," he panted. "An inspector wants to visit." I nearly dropped the ladle. Seriously? How did they even hear about us? Walter just chuckled, voice raspy. "Probably those bloggers talking. But listen to me. Don't forget your roots." That night, I didn't sleep. I flipped through Grandpa's notebook, rereading every recipe. I kept going back to his first line. "An honest dish doesn't need garnish. It only needs a true heart." On the day the inspector came, I wore my old linen shirt, hands shaking, palms slick with sweat. But when I held the knife, I took a deep breath and let myself sink back into the rhythm of the earth, into the heartbeat of each leaf. After the meal, the inspector stood, shook my hand, and said nothing more. But in his eyes, I saw something real: respect. 2 months later, my restaurant was awarded 1 Michelin-Star. It wasn't 3 stars, but to me, that single star felt like a radiant crown on my scarred land. After the official write-up, reservation emails exploded. Famous chefs reached out wanting to collaborate. Customers lined up outside the farm. One evening, as I was wiping down the last table, Walter sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey, smiling. "The last time I saw your grandpa smile this big was the day you were born." I sat beside him, a mug of hot tea in my hands. "I just wish he could see this." Walter shook his head, eyes on the star-speckled sky. "He's watching, and he's proud." In that moment, I no longer felt like the worthless youngest brother, no longer the dirt-covered punchline. I felt like Landon, the man who made the earth bloom, the man who turned a dream into a meal people could truly taste. That weekend, I saw Brian's name on the reservation list. Seeing it felt like a knife straight to my chest, and at the same time, like a final call from fate. Walter raised an eyebrow when he read the list. "Ready?" I looked at him, my hand gripping the edge of the chair. "Been ready." I knew that moment of reckoning was coming. This time, I wouldn't bow my head, and I swore I would not back down. That night, I stood in the corner of the kitchen, wiping down the small paring knife Grandpa used to cherish. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the adrenaline pounding through my veins. I heard a car pull up outside, familiar footsteps, that booming laugh I'd once wished I could bury 6 feet under. He swaggered into the main hall, striding like he owned the place, draped in a perfectly tailored Italian suit, dark blue tie popping against the crisp white shirt. Behind him trailed a few colleagues and a brunette woman, probably his new girlfriend. He laughed loud, shook hands with the hostess, his eyes scanning every corner like he was mentally appraising it. "Wow, this place looks rustic," he said, voice dripping with disdain. "I heard the owner used to be a farmer? Hilarious." I stepped out from the kitchen, knife still in hand. His eyes landed on me. He froze, mouth hanging open, one hand halfway up to order a drink. I smiled, walking over slowly. "Welcome to Haven Hollow Restaurant, Brian." The entire table went silent. His girlfriend looked around, clueless, while Brian stood there like a statue. I thought," Brian stammered, his face pale as chalk. "Thought I was still hawking vegetables at the farmer's market," I asked, my voice as calm as a midnight breeze. Every eye in the room shifted to us. Brian glanced at his colleagues, forced a tight laugh. "Wow, unexpected. Congratulations, bro." I smirked. "Thank you. Tonight, I'll be personally preparing your meal. I hope you're not allergic to fancy weeds." Brian swallowed hard, head dropping. I saw his hand shaking under the table, knuckles turning white as he gripped his napkin. I turned back into the kitchen, running my fingers over each leaf, each carrot. The knife struck the board, each chop sounding like a war drum. Walter stood nearby, quietly watching, his eyes glassy. "When that knife is in your hand, "You're no longer a farmer," Walter said softly. "You're an artist." I nodded, closing my eyes, letting the scent of soil, the crispness of the greens, the warmth of the kitchen sink into my blood. I stepped out with a tray of fresh salad, plating each dish carefully. Brian kept his head down, unable to meet my gaze. When I set the plate in front of him, I leaned down, voice low. "Enjoy. It's grown with real dirt and real dignity." One of his colleagues whispered, "This is incredible. Didn't this place get a Michelin-Star?" Brian only nodded, lips pressed tight, eyes red. I stood there for a moment, staring at him. "I remember you once offered me a janitor job in your office if I failed," I said, my voice soft as a breeze. "Funny thing is, I'm fresh out of cleaning positions." The entire table fell silent. His girlfriend stared at Brian, confused and a little afraid. Brian looked up, tears brimming. "Landon, I'm sorry." The apology spilled out, broken and weak. I only smiled, gave a small nod. "It's okay. Eat. Every dish tonight carries a story. If you listen closely enough, you'll hear the sound of the earth, the sweat, and dignity." I turned and walked back into the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Brian choke on a quiet sob. When the group finally left, Brian stopped at the door, turned back toward me. His eyes were a swirling mix of shame, respect, and a silent plea. "I really am sorry," he repeated, voice raw. "I was stupid, arrogant. I've been jealous of you for so long, but I could never admit it." I looked at him for a long time. Inside me, the old rage began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet, hollow stillness. "Go home, Brian," I said, voice low. "I've got to prep the garden for the morning." He lowered his head, shoulders caving in, and walked out into the night. I stood alone on the porch, the cold wind slipping down my collar. Walter stepped out, holding 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to me, smiling faintly. "You did it," he said. I shook my head, took a sip, feeling the burn run deep into my gut. "No, I didn't beat Brian. I beat myself." Walter nodded, his eyes glistening. "That's the hardest win of all." I looked out at the garden. Moonlight shone over the rows of green, making them glimmer. Somewhere in that breeze, I heard Grandpa's voice echo, "The soil never betrays the honest." I smiled, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath of the cold night air, feeling my heart thud strong and steady. Tomorrow, I'd still wake up before dawn, hands in the dirt, lungs full of dew. But I was no longer the worthless farmer. I was Landon, the man who turned a ridiculed plot of land into a masterpiece on a plate, who transformed humiliation into applause, who made a dream real. Dreams don't come with expiration dates, so long as you have the guts to fight for them.